Thank you, Dr. Ryan Lowery, for being with me today on the podcast. You guys, what an incredible guest I have to be able to talk to me about so many things going on. Um, Actually, really just to kind of help put some clarity in all the minutia that's out there, because the things that Dr. Lowery speaks about, talks about, really does bring a lot of truth for somebody who wants to live a healthy lifestyle. And he is the CEO of Ketogenic.com, author of the Ketogenic Bible, this bad boy right here, which I've read most of it. I'll say most of it. It's a great referral source. So I highly recommend anybody that wants some resources to go and purchase it. You can get it on Amazon. He earned his BS and MS in exercise physiology and exercise nutrition science from the University of Tampa, and completed his doctorate work at Concordia University in health and human performance, with focus on the effects of well-formulated ketogenic diet and exogenous ketone supplementation, which pretty much I think makes you an expert on this whole podcast we're going to do, which is really exciting. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on.
So when you were going through medical school, we'll just start at the very beginning. Why this, what brought you into keto? Was there something like a health that brought you into like, this is going to be my niche? Or tell me, where did it begin?
Yeah, so kind of going back to when I was a teenager, when I was very young, I lost my grandmother to heart disease. She had type 2 diabetes, was severely overweight, but she was like the Italian grandmother, the rock of our family, right? So she would feed an army, we used to say. So that weighed a lot on our entire family. Like, she was a rock of our entire family. So I said, you know what? If only someone would have stepped in and maybe said, Grandma, maybe lay off like the ton of carbohydrates that she was consuming all the time, maybe she'd still be here. Right? And if someone maybe could have been a voice of reason and come up with alternatives for how to make things just a little bit healthier, maybe she'd still be around. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to dedicate my life to that. So I went to University of Tampa, got my undergrad and MS in exercise nutrition science. And then I went on to get my PhD in health and human performance, with a focus on actually exogenous ketones is what I did my dissertation on. But what really sparked it for me is my mom has Crohn's disease, and that's started to flare up really high after my grandmother passed away. Ton of stress, ton of anxiety, so ton of inflammation with Crohn's. And so I said, you know what, let's look at this and see if different nutrition strategies could help. And so that's kind of what led me to the ketogenic diet over 11 years ago when we first started studying it. At that time, they were really studying it for Navy SEAL divers, kind of looking at oxygen toxicity, seizures, and it really wasn't as popular as keto is today, which is really crazy to see how far it's come. But that's kind of what led our path. And over time, we started saying, you know what, we were one of the first ones to do a study on the ketogenic diet and body composition. And then over time, we started realizing, hey, what if you could get in ketosis through kind of supplemental ketosis? What would that do? And that's kind of been a animal we've been looking at for the last 8-9 years, and exogenous ketones. And I really do believe that ketones are the future. So I'm super excited about the topic.
So let's put some clarity and some very healthy definition around keto, because the average mindset, if you will, thinks keto is like bacon, eggs, cheese, and like a lot of high processed fat foods. And in my mind, keto to me is fresh vegetables. It's healthy proteins. It's allowing your body to be the closest to organic Earth's products as possible, so you have this natural BHB production in your body. How would you define that?
Yeah, so it's important. I define it like this. Ketosis is a metabolic state, right, in which your body is primarily running on ketones over glucose. Now, that can happen two different ways. That can happen, well, it actually can happen more than two ways, but the two main ways that people know about it are through a ketogenic diet and through exogenous ketone supplementation. You can also enter into ketosis through extreme fasting, through extreme exercise, and you can get smaller levels of ketones that way. But that's truly what ketosis is. It's a metabolic state. But when we're talking about the ketogenic diet, to your point, a lot of people just think, oh, it's butter in my coffee, eggs, bacon all day long. And I
Yeah.
think that's old school of looking at the ketogenic diet. But now there's so many different alternatives where I think it should be more of a protein centric, uh, lower carb, fill in the rest with healthy, high quality fats. That's kind of the way I've always approached the ketogenic diet. I was never one to stick butter in my coffee. I do enjoy a good ribeye with some vegetables, like that's my approach to it. Yeah,
Well, what I'm hearing you say is it's balanced food that your body, it's clean fuel to produce more clean fuel. This is what I'm
exactly.
hearing.
Yep.
So there's this like fear around it when we talk about these exogenous ketones. We've got ketones in our bodies, right? There's three type, and you're gonna, give it all to us. But people have this fear that like, oh, if I take exogenous ketones, do I have to be on a keto diet, and will it put me into ketoacidosis?
Ooh, great questions. So, no and no. You don't need to be on a ketogenic diet to get the benefits of exogenous ketones. And in fact, I think you'll actually get more benefits of exogenous ketones if you're not on a ketogenic diet. But we've actually done some research at our lab where we actually did this in animals. We took animals, we put them on a standard diet. Then we took those same animals, changed nothing other than added exogenous ketones, and they lived longer. And then we put them on a ketogenic diet plus exogenous ketones, and they lived a little bit longer. So the way I like to explain it is find people where they're at. The first step is if I can get someone taking exogenous ketones, they're going to see improvement. If you want to take it to the next level, then you focus on things like a lower carbohydrate diet, exercise. All those things will amplify the effects or the benefits that you will get from the exogenous ketones. And then to answer your second question on the ketoacidosis, I think it's important to understand that ketosis is here. It's on one end of the spectrum. Ketoacidosis is on the other end of the spectrum. And they're two very different things. The only thing that they have in conjunction is that they have the word keto in them. So ketosis is a healthy metabolic state. Your blood ketone levels when you're in ketosis are from about zero point 0.3 millimoles, maybe all the way up to about 3 or 4 millimoles.
Wait,
When you're
what's a millimole mean? Because people are going to be listening and it's like, oh,
That's
what's a millimole?
So basically, it's a unit of measure that we look at to measure how many ketones are in your blood. So when you
Okay.
do a blood prick and you use one of those devices that I'm sure we've all seen, it measures it in millimolars. So zero point 0.3 to 4 millimolars. When you get into ketoacidosis, that starts at 15 millimoles, and you have a ridiculously high blood glucose level. So this typically only happens in uncontrolled type 1 diabetes, not in a normal, healthy state of ketosis.
So really, you have to either have a really unhealthy blood sugar stabilization system, something going on in your body, in addition to taking an absurd amount of exogenous ketone, whether it be esters, BHB, whatever it is, to really put you into that state. So there's not a lot to fear there because that sounds rare.
Yeah, I mean, you would basically the way it's achieved is through if you have some degree of type 1 diabetes and your insulin's not in check and you go into this state where glucose goes crazy. And when I'm talking crazy, I'm talking about it goes maybe upwards of 200, whereas most people are, say, 80 to 100. So you have really, really high blood glucose, the levels you would get after eating a ton of candy, and your ketones are really, really, really high, higher than you could even get if you're on a hardcore ketogenic diet, taking exogenous ketones and haven't eaten in 3 days and exercising, you still wouldn't get the level of ketones you would if you're in ketoacidosis.
Well, that's a great way to put it. So people can stop being scared of taking exogenous ketones every time they hear it. You guys, Ryan has a beautiful facility out in Florida where he works with very elite, um, you know, what do I want to say? The very, very exclusive individuals who come to him and Dr. Wilson, not only just for nutritional stuff, but they do a lot of studies, they do the research and they do consulting. And I would say what percentage of your clients comes where it's like about longevity?
Yeah, we're getting a lot more interest. I think the anti-aging longevity space right now is crazy hot. So a large portion of our clients are super interested in just optimizing, right? Because I think there's one thing to just be like, hey, I just want to feel better. But there's another level where it's like, I want to optimize. I already may feel good, but I want to be the best, right, at what I can do. So how do I optimize my performance, my mental clarity, everything?
I love that. All right. So you studied these exogenous ketones. So when you were in school to right now, where have you seen the research go from when you first started to now? Like, tell us what was then that was misunderstood to where we are today, where it's like, here's the clarity and what's real based off of the research.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I first started studying exogenous ketones, they were being investigated by the military, right? For the soldiers who were getting oxygen toxicity seizures, they were trying to see, can they take this. At the time, they were looking at something called a ketone ester. So they were trying to look at that to say, hey, can soldiers reap benefits from this? And they saw very positive results. The only downside was most ketone esters, if you've ever had one, taste like your great grandfather's that are
They're not good.
a rough night that you don't want to you just want to forget. That is what most ketone esters taste like, and so it's hard for the masses to really adopt that. But that's where it started, right? And I've taken plenty of them early on because that was all that was available, and you had to kind of hold your nose and throw it back. But that was where it started, and then we started uncovering, hey, there's these different other forms of ketones. There's these ketone salts. We now, kind of in the last couple of years, we've uncovered something called ketone free acid, where it's like a free acid form. But the ketone salts really changed the game on exogenous ketones because you're able to consume them in a powderized form or even in a liquid form. But even in like a sachet, you could rip it open, pour it inside of a drink, and now I can drink it. And not only does it not taste bad, you can actually make it taste really, really good. And on top of that, it comes with electrolytes. One of the hottest markets right now is a hydration category. You're seeing Prime and all these other hydration beverages explode, and all they are doing is putting in electrolytes into their product. And it's like, well, you have exogenous ketones, which are delivering a BHB molecule, which is fantastic, but now it's bound to the same electrolytes that you're seeing on a lot of these hydration drinks. You're getting a 2-for-1 package when you use some of these ketone salts.
Well, and even more to that point, being able to take an ester, which, processes differently in your body. How I'm understanding this molecule is that when you take esters, it's great, but it's not the most optimal because when you're taking the free acid or the salt, the electrolyte with the BHB, you absorb it, in your mouth into your bloodstream. So you don't have those extra processes, to take away from the energy that's trying to produce energy. So it sounds like it's even an even more optimal delivery system of taking it besides the taste.
Yeah, besides the taste, you're right. There are, when you take these ketone esters or 1,3-butanediol, which is a form of ketone ester, a lot of these need to be processed in the body, and primarily even in the liver. These esters need to be broken down in the liver. So when you're looking at it, and it would be a hard study to do, but it's one that needs to be done, is to look at the net overall ATP, which is the real energy that we're trying to get inside of our body. When you're looking at the net amount of ATP that's produced from ketone salts versus some of these ketone esters, I bet that the ketone salts are going to give you way more ATP because they're getting absorbed directly. There's no need for them to be processed in the liver. They don't have an alcohol backbone like some of these others ketone esters do. That it takes energy to process that stuff. So net net, it
Net
may,
net. Well, just to the point that you said, 1,3-butanediol. Let's talk about that for a second. Listen, I'm not against anything. I'm all about doing what works best for you. However, if you are properly educated and you understand the factual processes in your body, then you are empowered to make a decision that best serves you. So when 1,3-butanediol came out, I actually had a recovering alcoholic was sent samples, and we were advised by a high level professional that anyone with alcoholism shouldn't be taking because it has a similar way to put them into that process, and they're wanting to avoid, being thrown back into alcoholism. So how do you feel about these other products? I mean, let's just be really honest. These other products that are out in the market that aren't as good for you, especially if you're going to do an athletic event. I wouldn't want to take alcohol.
Mm. It's a great.
So,
I do think I think 1,3-butanediol has its place in possibly the alcohol alternative market. And
oh, okay.
there is a company that is positioning it that way, where it does. And if you I've had plenty of 1,3-butanediol in my time, and it gives you a slight buzz. But it's not something that I would take and then go jump on a bike or try and do a run, because it's kind of like, would you go do that after you took 2 or 3 shots of your favorite?
Tequila.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, but
You
to
guys,
see, that's the thing is like, let's talk about these options because what we want to do, right? It's like, do you want a protein form of chicken or steak? They're both have its place. Some people may not like red meat, right? So probably a bad comparison, but it sounds like 1,3-butanediol might be a good alcohol alternative if you want to enjoy and get that buzz and having it be healthy.
exactly. And so for people who are looking for an alcohol replacement instead of the tequila, 1,3-butadiene can be great because you will get an elevation in ketones, but it's going to give you that buzz, and your body's going to process it somewhat similarly than it does other alcohols. But if you're looking for more performance, when you're talking mental performance, physical performance, you really want to focus on what's going to get me the best net ATP, and that is BHB, whether that's delivered directly from ketone salts or the ketone free acid.
I love the free acid. Vault did this drink and everybody's loving it. So I'm hoping to see more of this product out there because you're getting less minerals and more BHB. And again, that direct absorption. Plus the energy drink industry is full of sugar and high caffeinated drinks. I think caffeine has its place too.
Sure.
You know, I'm not against caffeine, but I do think it's overused and people become so dependent on it. And that's where some of our health issues can stem from. So I love that there's that acid that people can start using and taking for that alternative. And you're part of another company, right? That you do a lot with Prove It, and you guys have incredible products. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I've met Brian and Terry and the Privet team back when they had just launched, and at the time it was super interesting because ketones were new, right? They were novel, and no one really knew what the heck ketones did. All Brian knew was, hey, you drink this ketone and you pee on a urine strip, and it's going to turn it purple. And he's like, well, that's cool. I don't know what it does in your body, but it's going to change the color of this ketone urine. And so through education and through time, we've started to realize there's a way bigger application to ketones than just peeing on a strip. And so it's been incredible working with them over the last 7-8 years, really trying to help educate the masses on what do ketones do, how can you properly utilize exogenous ketones to get the best benefit, and then how do we constantly reiterate with different unique ketone formulations, right? So how do you amplify the effects of ketones, make sure they're better absorbed? What other ingredients can help with that? So that's been an incredible process and super exciting along the way.
Can you put ketones in skincare products? Because if our skin is an organ and it absorbs, right? Seriously. I mean, we put coconut oil on our skin. I'm like, give me some MCTs, baby.
Great. It's a
Can
great
can
question. I've thought about this a lot. I do think it's possible. I think it would you would need to make sure the mineral load and maybe use the free acid inside of like a cream. But I do think that there could be some benefit there, just especially when you start talking about the anti-aging longevity benefits that ketones have. You theoretically, the way those are working in terms of the mitochondria, you would get a lot of that similar aspect on the skin, which is a great application.
hey, anything for if this is cheaper than Botox, like I'm all in. You know, people do say, because I was in bodybuilding and I kept a really low carb diet, I really do contribute it to that lifestyle why I look so young. People don't believe that I'm almost 40. I get that I'm like 30. So if it can make me look 10 years younger and then I can put this stuff on my face as well as take it, I'm all in. Right?
Right?
I mean, I wish I would have known about exogenous ketones and understood them 10 years ago. Truly. It would have been a game changer in my not just bodybuilding, but I think daily lifestyle, because I liked maintaining that lifestyle all the year round.
Yep. I agree. And you know what? The beauty of it is, due to individuals like yourself and these platforms, I think more and more people are starting to hear about ketones. I think early on, everyone just associated ketones with the ketogenic diet, or they heard ketones and they heard ketoacidosis. Now ketones are starting to become a bit more mainstream, and I'm looking forward to where we can walk down grocery store aisles and it's normal to see a ketone beverage on the shelf, or ketone supplements that are there, that instead of the ones currently that are there that are loaded with sugar and other junk. So I'm looking forward to those days.
Oh, me too. I mean, I know you've got your dog child, which is super cute, you guys. He's just a good dog dad. And I've got two boys, but what's most important for me is, they have all this stuff in school, all these soft drinks, all this stuff. So them being familiar with, and let's get into this, a fourth macronutrient outside of the other three. I send these in my son's lunches. I'll send him with exogenous ketones, and he'll take them during the day, and he notices a difference in his focus. Now, if a 14-year-old can take these and notice a difference, can you imagine what that would do for our adults?
It's huge, huge. And you really look at macronutrients, you have carbs, fats, proteins. I think ketones is the fourth macronutrient. And to your point, the way it affects the brain, to me, is the most fascinating area of exogenous ketones. There's a lot of things. We can talk about appetite, how it can help
Mm-hmm.
with appetite, how it can help with anti-aging and longevity, how actually we've done research that can show it can actually spare muscle. So tons of different applications. But to me, what's the most interesting is how ketones affect the brain, rapidly getting taken up and utilized in the brain. But mainly in situations in which the brain isn't functioning optimally because it's solely reliant on glucose, and people are like, oh well, I've been feeding it glucose. Well, what happens as we get older? Our body, we all start realizing it. Hey, we all know that we can't consume candy and carbohydrates the same way we could when we were 5 years old, right? Little kids
Right.
are running around and they're eating candy. Not that I'm recommending it, but they eat candy and they're fine. They run it off. I eat a Snickers. I look at a Snickers bar and I gain 5 pounds. You know what I mean? So it's just your body changes. The same thing is going on with your brain. As you get older, you can't solely provide your brain glucose and expect it to run efficiently, right? Imagine just feeding, you have this amazing, immaculate Lamborghini, and you're putting regular gas in it every single day. You're not cleaning it, you're not really washing it. Eventually, that Lamborghini is going to break down. The same thing is happening to your brain. Over time, it's going to break down because you're not giving it the fuel that it needs to run efficiently. You need to give it excellent fuel, and ketones are that fuel that can bypass a lot of the defective metabolism that's going on within the brain that's blocking carbohydrates and glucose from being taken up. But your brain can still take up and utilize ketones, and it thrives in doing so. And so, as we're getting older, and then even an area that we're super passionate about is sport. So, even in sport, I think the best thing you can do for your brain is protect it. I know that's a big topic right now in UFC and NFL and NHL. And ketones actually serve as have neuroprotective properties, which can kind of help protect the brain. So it's fascinating areas.
Well, I think isn't that really where the origination of ketones even kind of came into existence was not even about body composition. It really was about Alzheimer's and dementia. And if we go back to the beginning of our life, you're saying it perfectly. Like ketones were developing our heart and our brain. And synergistically, don't you need both those things really to live optimally? So why wouldn't you fuel them with the best things for them? And I think over time, as we've just been influenced by so many high processed foods. I mean, the conditioning that we have in commercials, and like you said, I'm at the airport and you've got a mom feeding her baby these modified, highly processed crackers, and so not even just about the brain, like what that's doing overall. It's you're suppressing those things. So it really just sounds like to me the work that you've been able to do and been influenced by has You're helping people come back to homeostasis.
That's it. Back to their native state, right? I think
Yep.
we're all born in this native state of ketosis. And through the consumption of highly processed foods, we've gotten further and further away from it. And we're starting to see the repercussions of that. People are getting early onset Alzheimer's at way younger ages than ever before. Alzheimer and dementia rates are at sky high rates. Obesity, sky high rate. Heart disease is sky high rates. And a lot of this is the result of lifestyle choices. A lot of these things are preventable. And so I think ketones can be a huge path and potential to help starting to reverse a lot of these kind of tragedies we're headed towards in terms of health and overall body composition.
Well, and you said with healthy glucose, so it's like you could still eat carbohydrates. There's just going to be a balance of when to implement ketones. So, in your opinion, as anyone listening, when they're like, "Well, where do I start?" Where's a good suggestion on where you time just starting taking ketones if you're eating a balanced diet and you want to feel more of the brain effects immediately?
Yep. I would recommend either first thing in the morning. So, like for me, I have ketones as right when I wake up. I kind of go through, do my gratitude journal, and then boom, I'll drink a nice ketone. The other area, if now, let me preface that by saying if you're used to drinking a 64-ounce Starbucks Frappuccino with 700 milligrams of caffeine, you're probably, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to cut that out and just drink ketones. You're probably not going to experience the same thing just because you're used to 700 milligrams of caffeine. That's a different animal to tackle. But if you're like me, like I don't drink caffeine often, but I feel ketones as soon as I drink them early on in the day. And then the other area, which I think can help a lot of people, is right after lunch and in between dinner for most people is their least productive time. It's the time when like you just ate your lunch, you're like, all right, cool. You go back to work or you're doing something. You might be good for another 30, 60 minutes. And then it starts creeping down and your blood glucose starts to drop a little bit. And you're like, oh man, I'm starting to get a little tired. And maybe you start snacking and you're just battling so that way you can get home and have dinner. Right then and there is a great time to have ketones to kind of refuel, refocus, get back in action, give you another hour, 2, 3, 4 hours of high quality work, and kind of blunt your appetite for when you go to dinner. So that way you don't go home and you're ravenously hungry, ready to eat anything and everything coming your way. You kind of are more sensible about it and can have a better option.
Well, because you're using brain energy. I notice that when I'm taking the ketones, my timing isn't about body or diet. It's not about any of that. It's about literally like my brain is slowing down. And you said it great. It's usually the middle of the day. Let's feed it. I'm using that energy. I'm gonna stay on top of my game till I get to dinner. Because I think that's where a lot of people fall off or miss their goals is they're just lack of brain food and they mistake it for being, dehydrated and then they overeat and leads into other stuff. But
Yes. Yep.
all right, so we've got these forms. I have to ask you. I love D and there's also this L
Mhm.
out there. So we've got a form of DL, exogenous ketones, and they activate other parts of the brain. I love the brain. So tell us more about like what the difference between a D and a D, or excuse me, and an L, and then combining them.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot that we don't fully know yet on the L, but it seems to be it activates different parts of the brain. So for someone who's more interested in the cognitive areas, L seems to have a lot of potential there. There's more research currently on D. D is the form that your body naturally makes when it's on a ketogenic diet fasting. So a lot of what I've experienced, a lot of our research was done on this D form. And people call it quote unquote the biologically active form. Whereas L is kind of this new novel, kind of uncovered area that still has a lot of research to be done, but the feeling you get or the cognitive effect of it seems to be pretty profound.
You know what else I noticed about these forms? And I've taken all of them individually, but my emotional state is so much more grounded when I have these ketones. So I love it around the hippocampus and the studies of the brain. And I'm so excited because aren't you guys working on putting more research out there around this too?
Very, yes, absolutely. Working on it as we speak.
Oh, perfect. When is it going to be out?
So, I mean, it's a
Or you're
great.
hoping, right? You're
I'm
like,
hoping,
timeline.
hoping sometime early in 2024, Q1 of 2024.
You know what I noticed too is I read in your bio you like to travel all over the world. Tell me if this has been your same experience too. So here in America, people get so focused on their diet and they don't think preventative until they're either sick. Most of them, not everybody, right? And then they start to think, okay, now I'm going to heal, and now I'm into the stage of longevity. I've been over to Europe a few times, and it's just really interesting. Like their mindset isn't so focused on the diet, but it's a lot more focused on sports performance, the hydration, and the brain. Like they want to have a healthy cognitive response. So that being said, where do you see exogenous ketones going in the next 10 years, not just in America, but over, throughout the world?
Yeah, I think there's a good blend between athletic performance and optimizing human performance that kind of come together and coexist. It ultimately comes down to just how do you optimize overall performance? And I think a lot of that stems in the world of anti-aging longevity. We've heard about that and we talked about it a little bit. But ultimately, how do you just become the best version of you? And I think unlocking your brain is a key element of that. And I think ketones are kind of the key to help you unlock your brain. It's allowing you to get to an area that most people have never tapped into before. It's kind of scary and sad to think about. Like some people that are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old probably haven't been in ketosis in decades. You know what I mean? Like they might have maybe like these people are eating from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed, and they sure aren't on a ketogenic diet. And they may not be exercising very often, so they're just in this constant cycle of being fueled by glucose and carbohydrates. Whereas like you haven't even realized what human optimization is until you've really been in a state of ketosis. And like we've talked about throughout this entire episode, like you don't need to be on a ketogenic diet in order to achieve that.
It's definitely a mindset shift. And I love that's what's so curious about it to me is I have found, if you're taking something healthy for your brain, it seems to be a little bit easier to shift your mindset into different states. Whatever it's doing on that neurological level, the anxiety, the stress, how it just supports lowering that. And I bring that up in the way I think you and I talked about this. I'm very much into emotional intelligence, right? It is the language of our subconscious, and our subconscious is the driver of our behaviors and habits. And so I'm always curious about how all the physical stuff relates to all of, how we change that mindset because, um, I just think if all of us had this higher clarity of what you're talking about, understanding the exogenous ketones, what would they be able to shift in their life to enhance it even more and
Exactly.
quicker?
And I think it's important to understand that when I'm talking about human optimization and becoming the best version of yourself, a lot of times people may be listening to this and go, "Well, that's not me. I'm not a high level athlete." The reality is, it's meeting you where you're at. If you're a stay at home mom, why not be the best version of that stay at home mom? Because guess what?
Right.
That means you're showing up better for your kids. Your kids are going to have a better experience with you, and ultimately, you're impacting their future. If you are a mailman and you're like, "Why does that affect me?" Guess what? You're going to be the best damn mailman there is, and you're going to want to uncover whatever it takes to be the most optimal. So that way, you know what? When you're done with your route for the day, instead of going home and feeling tired because you just drove around all day, you actually have a little bit more energy to go get a workout in, hang out with some friends, develop deeper relationships. All of that kind of intersects and has an impact.
So we're going to start selling a sachet called Instant Happiness, you guys.
There you go.
You can find this on our new website and no, I'm just teasing. I mean, really though, I think you said it just right. Where are you right now? How would you like to improve your life? And if that decision to put you in that motivation state could be a little simpler by something that's enhancing you physiology, why wouldn't you? So I
Okay.
love that you put it that way. Um, Ryan, as you've been going through, I don't know, however many years it's been total for you, was there one moment where you came across this research and you questioned what you were doing and why you were doing it? And in that moment of time when you had that thought, you had people that were kind of throwing seeds of doubt at you? Because then at that moment, you've got to have your own strong mental state to know what you're doing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, early on, we published one of the first studies 10 years ago on the effects of a ketogenic diet on body composition. And at the time, we were absolutely ridiculed for it. So, we would go present our findings at different conferences. People would stand up and go, "There is no way you need insulin in order to gain muscle. There's no way. It's impossible." And we are just like, it's not there's been no research done on this before, but here's the mechanisms by why what you can be in a state of ketosis and gain muscle and lose fat. And so we dealt with that for years. And then now it's kind of funny because you look at it, it's like people are like, oh yeah, that's possible. Yeah, the keto diet kind of exploded in popularity. But by that time, we were already so deep in looking at exogenous ketones that we like to stay 2, 3, 4, 5 years ahead. So we're already looking at things that I'm sure people in the next 2 to 3 years will be like, oh yeah, exogenous ketones, those are everywhere. Those are cool. It's like, well, we started studying them maybe 7, 8 years ago. And then what we're studying now, it's going to be 5, 10 years from now when people are talking about that. So that's kind of where I like to stay on what I call like the bleeding edge, trying to stay up to how can we continue to advance the field forward. And sometimes with that comes ridicule, and you got to be willing to eat that and take it.
Do you get ridiculed for having a glass of wine and a keto dessert every once in a while, being a ketogenic expert?
All the time. I mean, there's always going to be, I call them purists. There's always going to be purists.
Yeah.
And eventually they'll turn into your biggest fans. But a lot of times, I think the most important thing that I talk about, and anytime I go speak or speak with anyone in the community, I say, listen, what works is what you can sustain. I can sit here and say, you need to be super rigid. If you eat 1 gram of carbs over this amount, you're never allowed to have a carb again in your life. I could sit here and that would work until it doesn't. And someone goes, oh my gosh, I'm just going to binge and I'm going to eat everything. It's like, you find something that's sustainable. And if having a glass of wine once a week is sustainable for you, fantastic. If having a keto dessert to kind of get your sweet tooth taken care of, it's fantastic. Great. It's better than eating 17 Krispy Kreme donuts. Which I can say I've done before, but
just
yeah.
were you a little sugar hungover?
uh, I used to be a sugar holic. I said,
Oh.
I used to eat cereal for dinner. So I went through that phase of my life, and now my parents and I joke about it all the time. They're like, it's amazing to watch where I am today, and they're like, you as a kid would have never eaten like this, and so it's funny to watch how you adapt.
Do you ever had that memory of a kid? I have this memory as a kid. Like I wanted to have ice cream for dinner or a bowl of cereal. And my mom would always tell me no. And I would think in my head, as soon as I'm an adult, I'm going to do what I want. You're not going to tell me what to
That's,
do.
um,
That's what I like envisioned as you were telling. I'm like, I think I've been there.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I think to sum up that too, pick a diet as a pathway to launch you into something, educate yourself, and don't get stuck on the idea that you have to do it forever. It's just a pathway. And yes, sometimes you might have to go a little extra disciplined in the beginning just to shift that mindset. But that's all it is temporary until you cycle your body into this state of whatever it is you choose. So you're not tied for it forever. And I think that comes with working on the emotional wellness that comes with these foods and understanding them. And, you know, being able to just, like you said, where are you at and where do you want to go?
yeah.
So something I like to ask everybody is, if you weren't doing this work, what else do you have another hobby you think you would be doing if you weren't Ryan Lowery, PhD, ketogenesis, everything?
Mm. It's a great question. If you ask my wife, she would say I'd be a lawyer because I love to like critically think and argue. But that's my next life.
That's your next life?
If honestly, I absolutely love what I do. I love philosophy. I love studying. I love learning. It's one of my biggest passions. If I wasn't doing this, I love traveling. I'd probably travel the world and write and just learn and experience different areas of the world. I fortunately get to do that in a smaller capacity with what I currently do, but I am absolutely in love with what I currently do, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
I love that. And it sounds like you have an incredible partner that supports you in all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's key. Very key.
Very key. So does she do similar ways that you do, or was she like that before? Or like, was it like a first date and you're like, hey, I have these exogenous keto?
She's gotten used to it now, where she's on the program. But it's funny because everyone I get that question all like, does she eat strict keto? She doesn't. But we make better choices. So instead of making normal brownies, she'll make low carb brownies, and she enjoys them now. Or we'll make low carb ice cream together. But we'll still go out and have a sushi date once a month. So you find balances to kind of blend, but she eats a heck of a lot better than she did before we.
That's so key, especially if you want to maintain this long term. Just having someone like you said supports it, even if they're not an all-inner,
Exactly.
is just amazing. So to end on this final note, if you could sum up your life and the work that you're doing in a mantra or, maybe one of your favorite philosophy quotes. For example, mine is the one by Brene Brown that, talks about to know your light, you've got to go to the darkness. And so I want to know, like, what's your favorite go-to when you're questioning either your work or where your path is, that just kind of brings you back to what's important?
It's a great question. I mean, I'm big on just having different things around me to inspire me. One of my favorites, we actually have it in our lab. It says, if tomorrow wasn't promised, what would you give for today? And I think so often we take tomorrow for granted. I think I kind of look at every day as a gift. And in that kind of same mindset, one of the tattoos I have is of my dog Scooter, and then I have this quote that says, "Be here now." Oftentimes, I think for me, and this is hard to do when you're an entrepreneur, you get so wrapped up in different things, but a lot of times you can just like kind of go throughout your day, and then you look at yourself at the end of the day and you're like, what did I do? Like, you did so much, but you don't even remember what you did. And I think that's a travesty, to be on a tragedy. So I think it's hard to deal with that. And so I said, you know what? Every single thing that I do, I'm going to be intentional with it. So when I say be here now, like, I want to be all in on this podcast. I'm not going to sit here texting and listening and do like, so whenever I'm having a conversation, I'm all in. I'm here. I'm fully present. And then I'm on to the next thing, because I think every moment matters and you only get a finite amount of them. So for me, that's a very important thing that I live by.
I feel like I'm hearing you say too that it helps you keep you in a state of flow, because when you're present like that, you flow throughout your day and then you just feel like you've accomplished something.
Exactly right. And one of the people that we work with very closely is a good friend of ours, is Tony Robbins. So we work very closely with Tony, and one of his best sayings, that he talks about all the time, is that success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And I think a lot of
Mm.
people strive for success, and a lot of people, when they reach maybe some degree of financial success or physical body composition success, and they look in the mirror and they're just completely unfulfilled. So my biggest piece of advice is find something that fulfills you. Like, by staying present in the moment, it's part of what keeps me so excited about what I do. I'm super fulfilled at the end of every night. I can look myself in the mirror and go, I am very happy with what we accomplished today, and go into the next day with the same mindset.
I love that. It really does. It encompasses everything as a whole. So you guys, if you don't follow him on Instagram already, you should go do it, because his short clips and reels, he does put out a lot of incredible, valuable information, not just around exogenous ketones, but he talks about sweeteners. He talks about the things that come out where people are like either one way or the other, you bring balance and clarity to. And I think that's important, especially in a trusted source. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all the things. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. It's an absolute honor. I appreciate it.